All right, so how's everybody doing today? Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. And today is Juneteenth. Today is Monday, June 19th, 2017. And we are live. Should be broadcasting on Facebook Live and on YouTube. So I'm testing audio. Okay. So we're working there, and we should be on our YouTube channel also. So we're working there as well. All right. So let me post a message here. Okay. So today is a historical day, and we're going to talk some about the history of Juneteenth. Okay. And then also I'm going to do an overview of an online class that I'm teaching today, online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we're teaching that class today, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's another session in our 6-week, 12-hour online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So I'm teaching that from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. today. And you can register for that class also. It's only $40 for the full online course. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. So we'll post a link here so you can register for that online course also. All right. Okay. So hope everybody's doing well. The day's a Monday. Very, very busy week already. So you have a lot of people posting on social media about Juneteenth. Okay. And you have some people that don't know the history of Juneteenth. Okay. And a lot of people think it's ignorant to celebrate it, things like that. Well, it's not ignorant to celebrate it. It's important to understand our history. Unfortunately, most African Americans do not understand our history, which is one of the reasons why we are in the predicament we are in today. You know, some of those same African Americans who say it's ignorant to celebrate Juneteenth will turn around and celebrate the 4th of July. They'll celebrate the 4th of July, the 4th of July. OK, when most African Americans who had that legal designation, most black people were enslaved. You're still going to have, you have black Indians and things like that at that time who are autonomous. You have indigenous African people, et cetera. But you have African Americans who a lot of us are descended from who were enslaved African people. OK, but many of us will celebrate the 4th of July, as Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango called it, but won't celebrate Juneteenth. And at the same time, won't celebrate African Liberation Day, which is May 25th. Won't celebrate African Liberation Day. OK, which is very interesting. OK, so anytime I do a presentation, I know I may say some things that go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. So I usually say something like this: the space inside this circle. I usually have people put their fingers up to form a circle. I usually say the space inside this circle represents my realm of knowledge. Everything that I think I know about whatever I think I know is represented within the circumference of the circle. I must keep in mind that there's still things to know that exist outside the circumference of my own awareness. So the reason why I say that is because oftentimes when people hear something that contradicts what they believe, what they think they know, or what they've been taught, they automatically reject it without doing any research to determine the validity of the new information that they're learning. Also, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Also, if you're on YouTube, if you can share this on social media, share this also. OK, so Juneteenth commemorates June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas, when Union General Gordon Granger, goes into Galveston, Texas to deliver General Order Number 3. OK, and this is to free the enslaved African people who are in Galveston, Texas. OK, now this is after the Civil War has ended. OK, and the Civil War officially ends on June 2nd, 1865. It officially ends June 2nd, 1865. Okay. And you have the Civil War fought from 1861 to 1865. It was the bloodiest war in the history of this country. Up until that time, basically in the history of this country, is the bloodiest war. You're going to have 620,000 people killed in the Civil War. You're going to have 2.4 million people who serve in the Civil War. About 186,000 African Americans serve in the Civil War. Okay, so this is taking place at the end of the Civil War. Just to do a recap on the Civil War, so we can put this in historical perspective. In the spring of 1861, you're going to have decades of simmering tensions between northern and southern states in the United States of America over issues including states' rights versus federal authority, westward expansion, and then also slavery. And this is going to explode into the U.S. Civil War, the American Civil War, also called the War Between the States. And it starts April 12, 1861 with the attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Now, what precedes this is you're going to have the election of Abraham Lincoln, okay, November 6, 1860. All right. Now, Abraham Lincoln belonged to the Republican Party. All right. And you're going to hear me acknowledge some of the people on Facebook and YouTube as we do this broadcast. Everybody share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in, and on YouTube also. And then we're also going to do a brief overview of an online course I'm teaching today at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We have an online school for the African History Network. I teach those courses also. Okay. So what happens is you have these tensions leading up to the Civil War taking place. Abraham Lincoln being elected was pretty much the last straw. All right. Now, the Republican Party was formed in 1854, and the Republican Party was formed by groups of abolitionists. That was the counter to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party at the time was the party of the plantation owners, the Southern aristocrats. Majority of them are going to be in the South, the Democrats. OK, and the Republican Party was created to be a counter to the Democratic Party. And these abolitionists are pushing to end slavery. All right. Now, Abraham Lincoln himself was not an abolitionist, and we'll come to that shortly. That's a misnomer. Abraham Lincoln was not an abolitionist, but he's elected November 6, 1860. OK. And this was an event that outraged the Southern states, because they felt that he was going to free the slaves. He was going to end slavery, push to free the slaves. And they had about $5 billion in capital invested in the approximately 4 million slaves at that time, enslaved African people. Now, the Republican Party had ran on the platform of being of an anti-slavery platform, and many Southerners felt that there was no longer a place for them in the Union. Now, on December 20th, 1860, okay, so a month after the month after Abraham Lincoln is elected, you have South Carolina. The state of South Carolina succeeds from the Union, and South Carolina is the first state to succeed from the Union. And by February 1st, 1861, okay, you're going to have some more states that follow as well. Okay, you're going to have a total of 11 states that follow. Now, in Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address, which was delivered March 4th, 1861, Lincoln proclaimed that it was his duty to maintain the Union. It was his duty to maintain the Union. And this was the whole purpose here. The Civil War was not fought to end slavery. The Civil War was fought to bring the South back into the Union. OK, the Civil War was not fought to end slavery, contrary to popular belief. The Civil War was fought to it was not fought to end slavery. It was brought to bring the South back into the Union, because the South was where the large plantations were, the large farms, the majority of them, the large plantations, the majority of the large farms. That was where the majority of the wealth was in the country. Okay. And this is where at this time, the majority of the enslaved African people were. You're still going to have slavery in some northern states. Some northern states had already ended slavery, but you're still going to have some of it. But the majority of them are still going to be in southern states. Okay. So Lincoln said in his inaugural address, March 4th, 1861, he proclaimed that it was his duty to maintain the Union. He also declared that he had no intention of ending slavery where it existed, or of repealing the fugitive slave law. This was a position that horrified many African Americans and their white allies, white abolitionists who were their allies, things like this, right? So Lincoln's statement, however, did not satisfy the Confederacy. And on April 12th, the Confederacy is going to attack Fort Sumter. And this is April 12th, 1865, starts the U.S. Civil War. So you're going to have you're going to have the states that are going to join the Union are going to be Alabama, Georgia. The states that are going to join the Confederacy are going to be Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. They all elect to secede from the Union, and they form the Confederate States of America, in February of 1861. And they're going to elect Jefferson Davis, who was a war hero from the Mexican War, 1846 to 1848. And they begin organizing an independent government that's modeled after the U.S. Constitution, with the exception of allowing slavery in all of the states that exist in the Confederacy. Okay, when you look at the Union at the time, they tried to keep a balance between free states and states that had slavery. When you look at westward expansion, you're going to go, if you go back to 1854, you're going to have the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Okay. And the Kansas-Nebraska Act was designed to allow sovereignty when it came to slavery, meaning that the citizens of those particular states could determine whether or not they could have slavery there. They would escape federal oversight or the federal government enforcing whether or not slavery could exist. This was the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. All right. So you're going to have these different events that lead up to the Civil War happening and lead up to the Juneteenth. All right. History.com has a good article on the American Civil War. And in 1854, the U.S. Congress passes the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which essentially opened all new territories to slavery by asserting the rule of popular sovereignty over congressional edict. Pro and anti-slavery forces struggled violently in quote unquote bleeding Kansas, while opposition in the act in the North led to the formation of the Republican Party. Okay, the westward expansion, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, is going to lead to the formation of the Republican Party, and then Lincoln is going to become elected as a member of the Republican Party, elected the president. Okay, so you're going to have the Civil War starts, and it's going to last 4 years. It's going to end officially ends June 2nd, 1865. Okay, and you're going to have the Emancipation Proclamation first issued. A preliminary one is first issued September 1862. Okay, then you're going to have the official Emancipation Proclamation that most of us know, that's going to be delivered January 1st, 1863. January 1st, 1863. Okay. Now, like I said, it's important to note that Lincoln was not an abolitionist. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves as we think it did. It was designed to put pressure on the southern states that were in rebellion and to bring the South back into the Union. This was Lincoln's goal. And he basically said if he could keep, in his inauguration speech, he said basically it was his goal to keep the Union together. All right, now, Lincoln did believe that slavery was morally wrong, but there was one big problem with this. He didn't know what to do about it. See, abolitionists knew what to do about it. They knew that the slaves had to be free. Now, slavery was sanctioned by the highest law in the land, the U.S. Constitution. So the U.S. Constitution is signed September 17, 1787, right? And we know that Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3 or Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution is called the 3/5 Compromise, the 3/5 Compromise of the U.S. Constitution. Now, the 3/5 Compromise, contrary to popular belief, does not state that enslaved African people were 3/5 of a human being. That is a total misunderstanding of the 3/5 Compromise and a total misunderstanding of history. Okay, I encourage you to read, for the sake of time, I encourage you to read the article from theroot.com and study the history behind it. Theroot.com is called 3/5 Clause, Why Its Taint Persists. 3/5 Clause, Why Its Taint Persists. Okay, and basically the 3/5 Clause states that for the purpose of apportionment and taxation, for the purpose of apportionment and taxation, 3/5 of the population in bondage would be counted. 3/5 of the population in bondage would be counted. This is for the purpose of apportionment and taxation. Okay, so it's important to understand this history. What is apportionment? What is apportionment? Apportionment dealt with the process for determining how many seats in the U.S. House of Representatives a particular state would have. This is apportionment. Okay. Apportionment dealt with determining how many seats in the U.S. House of Representatives a particular state would have. Well, we know that the U.S. House of Representatives is based upon population. Okay, so a state today like California has more members of the U.S. House of Representatives than a state like Vermont, because California has a much larger population. They're the most populous state in the country. Well, the question has to be asked, well, how does that translate when it comes to determining how to count the enslaved population? You have the northern states saying if the South, if you count all of those enslaved African people, well, then this would give the South total dominance in the U.S. House of Representatives, and the South could just run through whatever bills they want through the U.S. House of Representatives. Okay. And so this is the argument from the North. The South wanted as many enslaved Africans counted because the argument from the South was that, well, wait a second. In many northern states, you have more white people in many northern states, but in many southern states, the southern states had, in many of them, they had a larger overall population when you counted in the enslaved African people. So you have this debate going on trying to determine how do you count the enslaved, how do you count the enslaved African people? Number one, for the purpose of apportionment, determining how many seats in the U.S. House of Representatives southern states are going to have. Number two, also for the purpose of taxation, because the enslaved African people were also classified as property, and property has to be taxed. You could leave them in a will as an inheritance. And when you study Martha Washington, who was George Washington's wife, Martha Washington owned more slaves than George Washington did, and she got most of her slaves through an inheritance. She got them through an inheritance. And then when she died, she left in her will that her enslaved African people would be distributed among her relatives. OK, because this was in the original will that gave her enslaved African people in the first place. OK, so they're trying to debate this. So they go back and forth trying to figure out, OK, do we count half of the enslaved population? Do we count 3/4 of the enslaved population? OK, they finally agreed to count 3/5 of those people enslaved. Okay, to count 3/5 of that population. Okay, so meaning that if if you had 1 million, hypothetically, if in say hypothetically in a particular southern state, you had 1 million enslaved African people, okay, you're going to count 3/5 of that population, okay, and you would determine the number of seats in the U.S. House of Representatives based upon 3/5 of that population, which is 600,000, as opposed to the total 1 million. This is the agreement they agreed to, called the 3/5 compromise. Now, what most people don't know is at the same time, the population of free African Americans, their full population was counted. The population of free African Americans, their full population was counted. Okay, so the 3/5 compromise does not state, it does not mean, in this, it was not the intent to say that African Americans or enslaved African people were 3/5 of a human being. That is not what it says. That's a total misunderstanding of the history and a total misinterpretation of Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Okay, commonly known as the 3/5 compromise. That's not what it says. And then also, this is going to be corrected by the 14th Amendment in 1868. But even if you look at the U.S. Census, the first U.S. Census is taken in 1790 when the first Congress meets. And when the first U.S. Census is taken, they're counting the full population of enslaved African people, because the U.S. Census basically was created to keep track of the population of enslaved African people, especially in the southern states, in relation to white people, because in a lot of southern states, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, things like this, the enslaved African population was greater than the population of white people. So they were outnumbered. So you have the U.S. Census taken. The first census is taken 1790. The first national census is taken 1790 after the first Congress meets. Okay, so it's important to understand this background history that leads up to Juneteenth taking place, leads up to the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War, leads up to June 19th, 1865. Okay. And these are some of the things that we deal with in the online course that I teach: Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years of African history, African American history in the class, and we deal with things chronologically so we can understand thousands of years of history leading up to the transatlantic slave trade happening, history leading up to the Civil War happening, put things in a historical perspective. And we deal with the African presence in this country that was here going back at least 51,700 years. The Khoisan come from Southern Africa. They have the oldest DNA on the planet, and they were here for tens of thousands of years. You have a presence from ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet here as well. The transatlantic slave trade did happen, but African people were already here before we were brought here August 20th, 1619. There were already millions of African people here. Okay, so hopefully that helps to try to put things in historical perspective here. All right. Now, when we look at Lincoln, there's a lot of people think that Lincoln was an abolitionist. That's not true. I know they teach it to our children in school, which is problematic. That's not true. So the initial Emancipation Proclamation was September 22nd, 1862. Okay, September 22nd, 1862. Now, so Lincoln was he won the candidacy as a member of the Republican Party organized by groups of abolitionists. Slavery was sanctioned by the highest law in the land, the U.S. Constitution. Now, the nation's founding fathers, or as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing used to call them, the Fondling Fathers, also struggled with how to address slavery. And in the U.S. Constitution, like we just talked about, nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it mention the word slavery or slave. Okay, they'll say bondage. Okay, now they did include key clauses protecting the institution of slavery, including a fugitive slave clause and the 3/5 clause or 3/5 compromise, which allows Southern states to count enslaved African people for the purposes of representation in the federal government. Now, in a 3-hour speech in Peoria, Illinois, in the fall of 1854, Abraham Lincoln presented more clearly than ever his moral, legal, and economic opposition, okay, to slavery. And then he admitted that he did not know exactly what should be done about the institution of slavery within the current political system. Okay, abolitionists were fighting to abolish slavery, and you have the Underground Railroad operating at this time. The Underground Railroad is going to start right around 1830. The majority of the Underground Railroad is going to be in northern states, and these were groups of abolitionists. Now, the Underground Railroad was mainly ran by African Americans, freed, runaway slaves, and those maybe born free. And you have some white allies that are helping with the Underground Railroad as well. All right. Now, when we look at the Emancipation Proclamation, as I said, it did not free the slaves. OK, what is technically going to legally free enslaved African people was the 13th Amendment, ratified December 6, 1865, adopted December 18th, 1865. OK, now, the Emancipation Proclamation is going to be a military measure. And it did not apply to slave states that were border states. OK, the Emancipation Proclamation basically states. Now, you can read all of these documents at loc.gov. OK, loc.gov. Now, loc.gov is the Library of Congress's website. So all these historical documents, the Emancipation Proclamation, the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, you can read all those at loc.gov. In this archives.gov, you can check that out also at archives.gov, okay, which is the National Archives, U.S. National Archives. Okay, so the Emancipation Proclamation basically states that slaves in the states of rebellion are free, but those enslaved Africans in the states in the Union are still enslaved. Okay. When it came to border slave states like Delaware, Maryland, and Kentucky and Missouri, okay, all of these states remain loyal to the Union. They remained loyal to the Union, but they still held slaves. So they sympathized with the Confederacy, but they remained loyal to the Union. They stayed in the Union, and they were allowed to keep their slaves until slavery ends. So Lincoln also exempted selected areas of the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America, that had already come under Union control in hopes of gaining the loyalty of whites in those states as well that were part of the Confederacy. In practice, then, the Emancipation Proclamation did not immediately free a single slave, as the only places it applied were places where the federal government had no control. The southern states currently fighting against the Union. Okay, if you read this article, it's a historical article from history.com. History.com. Now, history.com is the official website of the History Channel, history.com. They have an article, 5 things you may not know about Lincoln, slavery, and emancipation. 5 things you may not know about Lincoln, slavery, and emancipation. Okay. So once again, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the enslaved African people. It was used as a political football to try to bring the South back into the Union. And then you have the states of Tennessee and West Virginia. They're going to come back into the Union during the Civil War, and they're allowed to keep their slaves until the Civil War ends. Okay. So Abraham Lincoln was trying to use freeing the slaves as a political football to bring the South back into the Union. All right. Okay. Now, so all this is taking place. We go throughout history. So you have the end of the Civil War, which officially ends June 2nd, 1865. Officially ends June 2nd, 1865. Okay. Now, As the Union troops are going through the southern states, they are freeing the enslaved African people, and they are enforcing this military order, the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay. So the state of Texas was called the Lone Star State. And they basically joined the Union because there's pressure on them. It's a slave-holding state, but there's pressure on them to join the Union, okay? Because Texas used to be territory of Mexico, okay? And this is where you get into the fight at the Alamo, things like this, right? So what's going to happen is that you did not have a lot of Civil War battles that are going to take place in Texas, okay? And in Galveston, Texas, the enslaved African people there did not know that they were free. The news had not gotten to the enslaved African people to let them know that they were free. But the other thing is not just the news getting to them, but you have to have the enforcement. You have to have the enforcement of the law coming from the Union states. Okay. So on June 19th, you have, well, actually the day before, you have Union General Gordon Granger and 2,000 federal troops. They land on the beach of Galveston, Texas, to take control of the last unoccupied Confederate state. And this is the state of Texas. Okay. Now, on June 19th, 1865, the day after that, he's going to deliver General Order Number 3 from the balcony of Ashton Villa in Galveston, Texas. And here's an excerpt of what the proclamation said. It said, the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and property rights between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. Okay, let me repeat this. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and property rights between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor, which means that these 4 million enslaved African people were now free. And well, let me rephrase that. The other enslaved African people in the other states had already been set free. As the Union troops go through and gain control of territories in the Confederate states, gain control of the states, they are freeing the enslaved African people. The last territory to come under control is going to be the state of Texas and Galveston, Texas. And this General Order Number 3 is delivered June 18th, 1865. It's important to note that there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country up until 1865, from 1619 to 1865. There were at least 216 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. Okay. And our skills were as good as whites or even better. Our skills were as good as white people, or in many cases better, because we were the one doing the hard labor. We were the one doing the work. Okay. So, and And we were you had African people who were engineers, blacksmiths, anchor makers, barrel makers, all different types of skills. Okay, we had. So now we can compete for fair wages, hypothetically, with white people. So what's going to happen is you're going to have large labor unions created. So like the National Labor Unions created in 1866 to protect jobs for white men and lock African Americans out of the jobs we have been doing for free for the past 400 years for the most part. Okay. The book, and I'm trying to find this, my notes on this to give you some of this information here. How's everybody doing today? I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer. You see me in the documentaries Black Friday, What Legacy Will You Leave? You see me in the documentary Resurrecting Black Wall Street, The Blueprint, from director Dorian Chandler and Your Black World Films. I'm in the upcoming documentary Elementary Genocide Part 3. Elementary Genocide Part 3 from director Raheem Shabazz. So we're talking about the history of Juneteenth, and I'm also going to do an overview of an online course that I'm teaching tonight, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, okay? So the course is a 12 hours, actually a 7-week course. 12-hour, 7-week online course. Normally meets on Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Last Friday, I was really pissed off about the Falando Castile verdict. You saw me do a 2-hour, 5-minute presentation about that. Here it's on Facebook and it's on our YouTube channel. So I wasn't in the frame of mind to teach the class Friday. So as fate has it, today is Monday, is Juneteenth. So we're going to teach the class tonight. It'll start about 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, you can register for the full online course. We'll post a link here. The full online course is only $40. It's a 12-hour, basically 6-7 week online course. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. Okay, if you miss anything. As soon as you register, you'll be able to watch the class from last week. We have about 10 or 12 hours of bonus content also. And what it's going to do, we have a new section starting up this Friday, June 23rd. When you register for this class for tonight, you're automatically going to be registered for the new Friday class that's starting up this Friday. So you'll be able to start at the beginning this Friday. Okay. And those watching on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, we'll post a link here also. You can register as well. Okay, so a lot of our people don't understand Juneteenth, don't understand the Civil War, don't understand our history, don't understand slavery. And, you know, what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you have been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Okay. All right. So, and when we look at the condition that we're in, a lot of that has to do with not understanding our history. All right. Okay. So very briefly here, I was at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History here in Detroit, and shout out to some of the people watching us on Facebook, Abel, Carl, Sasha, some of the people watching us on Facebook. Hey, be sure to share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Okay. We have Loic, Charlton, just a few of the people watching us on Facebook. And be sure to follow our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. This is the page we're broadcasting on. I'm the creator of the African History Network, the founder of the African History Network. And those watching us on YouTube, Regia, Thema, Boards in the Hood, Machona, just a few people watching us on YouTube also. Okay. So I was at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History 3 or 4 years ago, right? It's one of the largest African-American museums in the country. I live in Detroit. We're broadcasting from Detroit. Okay. So when you go through the main display, the main exhibit, and they have a replica of a slave ship, and you come out on the other side, and they deal with milestones in African-American history, and you see Frederick Douglass, you see Harriet Tubman. I think they have a statue of Sojourner Truth. But there was a display on the wall, like there's a display on the wall, and it listed the skills, trades, and crafts that we had in this country from 1619 to 1865. Now, this information is a directory of occupations held by Black artisans and craftsmen. And it comes from the book, The Other Slaves, Mechanics, Artisans, and Craftsmen from 1978, written by James Newton and Ronald Lewis. So they list all these skills, trades, and crafts we had in this country. But there was a sign there that said, you can't take pictures. You can't take pictures, right? So I spent an hour writing them down, and I numbered them. And this is how I know there were 262. I spent an hour writing them down, and I numbered them. And I deal with this in a lot of my presentations, okay? So here are just a few of them. Anchor makers, artists, barkers, B-A-R-K-E-R-S, barrel makers, bartenders, basket makers, beer makers, blacksmiths, boarding house keepers, boat corkers, C-O-R-K-E-R-S, boatmen, like boats on in the water, boatmen, book binders, boot blacks. Boot blacks are shoe shine boys. Boot blacks, okay? Brass founders, brewers, like brewing beer, bricklayers, brick makers, bridle makers, bridles for horses, bridle makers, butchers, cabinet makers, candle makers, carpenters, carpet cleaners, carriage trimmers, carvers, caterers, chain makers, C-H-A-I-N, chain makers, chair makers, chimney sweepers, clergymen, clerks, cloth makers, clothing cleaners, cloth cleaners, cigar makers, coachmen, coach painters, cobblers, coffin makers, confectioners, candy, chocolates, things like this, confectioners, cooks, coppersmiths, cotton gin makers. So we know the cotton gin is created early 1790s, about 1791 by Eli Whitney, but you have copies of the cotton gin that are created also. Because of the copies of the cotton gin, and then the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, when the U.S. gets 828,000 square miles of land from France because of the Haitian Revolution to Saint Louverture and Bouc-Medata, Dessalines, they beat the hell out of the French and Napoleon Bonaparte, almost bankrupts France. It forces France to sell their territory in this land. So the U.S. gets 828,000 square miles of land for less than 3 cents an acre. And they're able to carve out about 15 new states out of this new land. So because of the creation of the cotton gin, which was a device that efficiently picked the cotton seeds out of cotton, okay, the cotton gin and the copies of the cotton gin are going to reduce the overall cost of producing cotton. It reduces the overall cost of cotton products, clothing, things like this. It increases the profitability. Then you have this new land, and this is new land because of the Louisiana Purchase that gives the U.S. new land to grow crops on, things like this. Now, they tried to keep a balance between enslaved states and free states, right? But this gives new territory for them to have slavery. So you're going to have an increase in the demand for slaves, enslaved African people, because of Louisiana Purchase, because of the cotton gin creation. Then in 1808, you had a 20-year clause in the U.S. Constitution that expires. And so when the Constitution is signed September 17, 1787, there's a 20-year clause in it that kept slavery intact, in the importation of slavery intact. 1808, you have the law go into effect that outlaws the importation of enslaved African people into this country, yet the institution of domestic slavery can still exist legally. So because of this 20-year clause in the Constitution, then this is going to give a rise to the need for slave breeding. So 1808 and on, the slave breeding practice is going to explode in this country, become one of the most popular, most profitable types of businesses in this country, slave breeding. Okay, so you have to understand how a sequence of historical events lead up to other events taking place. This is why, like in the online class that I teach, we deal with things chronologically as much as possible. We don't start in 1619. We don't start with African people in slavery. Okay, and we deal with thousands of years of history. So you have cotton gin makers. You have daguerreotypers. The daguerreotype was the first photographic camera invented around 1826 by John Daguerreotype, the first photographic camera. Decorative furnishers, distillers, domestics, those working in the house, you know, domestics, things like this, taking care of the children, what have you, maids, things like this, domestics. Draftsmen, dressmakers, druggist assistants, like in pharmacies, druggist assistants, engine builders, engineers, engravers, fishermen, flour inspectors, FLOUR, flour inspectors, furniture makers, gardeners, general mechanics, glove makers, gold pencil finishers, goldsmiths, gravers, hairdressers, harness makers, hatters, hemp baggers. Hemp was a crop grown when you had the British colonies before the American Revolution, 1775 to 1783. Hemp was a very popular crop that was grown in this country. And hemp is the actual fiber of the marijuana plant. And they're going to make different products from hemp. They make oils, all different types of things from this. Okay. It wasn't outlawed basically until 1937, when Harry J. Anslinger lied in his congressional testimony in front of the U.S. Congress, because he was the first chairman of the National Narcotics Commission. Okay, Harry J. Anslinger. And this was all based upon racism. It was based upon because he in his congressional testimony, he said that Negroes and Filipinos and Mexicans, things like this, were using marijuana. He called it marijuana. And he said that white women craved black men sexually when they were high on marijuana. This is why it made it legal. They instituted the marijuana tax of 1937, which basically made it illegal. This is why, because before then marijuana was legal. Okay, so these are just some of the skills, trades, and crafts we had in this country from 1619 to 1865. Okay, there were a total there were at least 262. This is what the book laid out, The Other Slaves by James Newton and Ronald Lewis, and I went through and numbered them from the display at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. Okay, everybody doing all right today? Okay, how you all like this information? You all learning anything? Okay, and be sure to register for our online class. We had a class, we have a session tonight, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And all the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch anything you missed. We're doing the session tonight, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we deal with some of this type of information and a lot more in the class. And I teach the class. Okay, so these are events leading up to June 19th, 1865, when Union General Gordon Granger goes into Galveston, Texas with 2,000 federal troops. And they have the troops. They have the manpower to actually enforce General Order Number 3, enforce the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, so He said, quote, in General Order number 3, he said, the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and property rights between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired laborer, employer and hired labor. The freedmen, those enslaved African who were free, the freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. Okay. So basically what they were saying was, they're going to free you, but they were encouraged to basically stay on those plantations and work for wages from their former slave masters. You're going to have the Black Codes instituted in 1865 to regulate the movement of the formerly enslaved African people. And then you're going to have the sharecropping system instituted to exploit their labor legally. And you're also going to have the convict leasing system used that's going to criminalize them and exploit their labor through the convict leasing system, which is like prison chain gangs, things like this. And that's going to be used from 1865 to 1928, the convict leasing system. Now, he goes on to say they are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. So they're free, but they basically wanted those enslaved African people to stay on those plantations and work on those plantations. This is in Galveston, Texas. This is General Order number 3 delivered in Galveston, Texas. Now, word of emancipation gradually spread over the vast state of Texas, despite the efforts of some slaveholders to maintain slavery. Because you have to understand, the South had about $5 billion invested in their 4 million enslaved African people. $5 billion. Now, African Americans, however, would not be denied the liberty that had eluded them for so long. When the news came, entire plantations were deserted. You ain't have to tell me twice. We're getting the hell out of here. We don't know where we're going, but we're getting the hell out of here. When the news came, entire plantations were deserted. Many African Americans that were brought to Texas from Arkansas, Louisiana, and Missouri during the Civil War returned back to those respective states, while Texas freed persons headed from Galveston, Texas, Austin, Texas, and Houston, and other cities where federal troops were stationed. The freed people created a number of poems that reflected their new status, including a poem that said, slavery chain done broke at last, broke at last, broke at last. Slavery chain done broke at last, gonna praise God till I die. Now, emancipation news often arrived with Union troops who fanned out across the state of Texas. Felix Haywood, a North Carolina born Texan, recalled the summer day in 1865 when he heard of his emancipation. Okay, so this is a former enslaved African person. Okay, he said he recalls the day in the summer day in 1865 when he heard of his emancipation while working on a cattle ranch near San Antonio. So he says soldiers all of a sudden was everywhere, coming in bunches, crossing and walking and riding. Everyone was a singing. We was all walking on golden clouds, hallelujah. Nobody took our homes away, but right off colored folks started on the move. Nobody took our homes away, but right off colored folks started on the move. They seemed to want to get closer to freedom, so they know what it was like. It was a place or a city. They seemed to want to get closer to freedom, so they would know what it was like. It was a place or a city. Now, even in Felix Haywood's celebration, he mused on the meaning of that freedom as well, because this is a totally new experience for these enslaved African people. Now we know freedom was on us. He said, we know freedom was on us, but we didn't know what was to come with it. We thought we was going to get rich like the white folks. And a lot of poor white people thought they were going to get rich from Donald Trump, but that's not going to happen. A lot of poor white people thought they were going to get rich from Donald Trump, but that's not going to happen. His budget is going to kick them in the behind. This is what I warn people about. Okay. Somebody posted about the Devil's Punch Bowl. That was in Mississippi, if I remember correctly. The Devil's Punch Bowl. And this was after, this was like a mass grave site after the Civil War. It's in Natchez, Mississippi. The Devil's Punch Bowl is a place located in Natchez, Mississippi, where during the Civil War, authorities forced tens of thousands of freed slaves to live in concentration camps. And this is also going to be, you're going to have a lot of them that die. You're going to have thousands of them that die as well in these concentration camps. It becomes like mass graves. We'll post this article here. You know, we post articles dealing with history and current events throughout the day at our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. So be sure to follow us on Facebook at the African History Network. We'll post this link here. This is about the Devil's Punch Bowl. This is from blackden.com. Blackden.com. Okay, so he said that Felix Haywood, okay, who got his freedom in Galveston, Texas, 1865, June 19th, 1865. He said, we thought we was going to get rich like the white folks, being that they were free. He said, we thought we was going to be richer than the white folks, quote, cause we were stronger and knowed how to work, and the whites did not. And they didn't have us to work for them anymore. But it didn't turn out that way. We soon found out that freedom could make folks proud, but it didn't make them rich. Freedom could make folks proud, but it didn't make them rich. Okay. Now, although news of emancipation came at different times during the Texas summer and autumn 1865, local enslaved African people gradually settled on June 19th as their day of celebration. Because as the Union troops are going through the South, as they're going through Texas, they are freeing enslaved African people. Beginning in 1866, these former slaves are going to celebrate on June 19th and commemorate Juneteenth. They call it Juneteenth, which is a contraction of June and 19th. So beginning in 1866, they held parades, cookouts. Some people call them picnics, but it's cookouts, barbecues. They gave speeches in remembrance of their liberation. By the year 1900, the festivities had grown to include baseball games, horse races, street fairs, rodeos, railroad excursions, and they would have formal balls, you know, formal dances, things like this, balls. Two distinct trends emerged with these early celebrations. You have the oldest trend of the surviving former slaves who were often given a place of honor, okay, in these celebrations. That place of honor rose direct in proportion to the dwindling numbers of the survivors who were formerly enslaved African people with each passing year. Secondly, another tradition that's going to rise, you have African Americans in Texas who initially used these gatherings to locate missing family members, and soon they became staging areas for family reunions. All right, because one of the things that we do after slavery ends, one of the first things we do is try to find lost loved ones who were sold off, separated, things like this. So you have husbands searching for lost wives, and husbands and wives searching for children, and children searching for parents. And the Freedmen's Bureau, the Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands, the Freedmen's Bureau, one of the things that the Freedmen's Bureau did was to help former slaves find lost loved ones, because we were trying to put the family back together also. Okay, so by the year 1900, Juneteenth had unofficially become Texas Emancipation Day. Texas Emancipation Day, and was sponsored by African American churches and civic organizations. Now, Juneteenth was so prominent that white politicians, including various Texas governors, addressed the largest gatherings, which sometimes included upwards of 5,000 people in Houston and Dallas, Texas. Juneteenth had by this point surpassed the 4th of July, or some of us call it the 4th of July. Juneteenth by this point, by 1900, had surpassed the 4th of July as the biggest holiday of the year for African Americans in Texas. Now, African Americans are going to start to migrate from Texas to the West Coast, and they're going to take this celebration with them. Okay. And you're especially going to see this during World War II and after World War II. So Juneteenth simultaneously declines in the state of Texas and is going to grow in the emerging African-American communities of Los Angeles, San Diego, and Oakland, California. And then you see African-Americans going to Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington. So you're going to see it rise in those areas also. Now, by the 1970s, however, many African-Americans, including those in Texas, have forgotten about the holiday's origins and its significance in African-American history, because a lot of us have forgotten our history. Okay, the history was not passed down for the most part from just the history of our people and the struggle of our people. It wasn't passed down for the most part from that civil rights generation to the next generation, for the most part. So in the 1980s, you're going to have a number of local community activists who rediscovered Juneteenth, and they persuaded public officials to embrace the holiday. Not surprisingly, Texas in 1980 became the first state to declare Juneteenth an official state holiday. Okay, Texas in the year 1980 became the first state to declare Juneteenth an official state holiday. Other states in the West began to recognize the holiday as well. In 1994, the modern Juneteenth movement began when advocates from across the country gathered in New Orleans when they pledged to work for national recognition of the holiday. You're going to have a number of holiday promotion organizations that are going to emerge after that meeting, including the National Association of Juneteenth Lineage, NAJL, National Association of Juneteenth Lineage. You have the National Juneteenth Celebration Organization. You have the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation. In 1997, the U.S. Congress passed a resolution officially recognizing June 19th at Juneteenth Independence Day in the United States. So the U.S. Congress officially recognizes June 19th. Now, I don't know if Donald Trump said anything about it today, but in 1997, the U.S. Congress passed a resolution officially recognizing June 19th as Juneteenth Independence Day in the United States. Now, 3 years later, the first annual Washington Juneteenth national holiday observance took place in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. And today, by June of 2011, you had 39 states and the District of Columbia that had established either full or partial recognition of the holiday. And today, you have about 43 states that officially recognize Juneteenth. Okay, so this is what we celebrate today. Now, it's important to understand that this is a more significant holiday for African Americans than the 4th of July, July 4th, because most of us were not free. Okay, you had enslaved African people. But it's also true that African people are still dependent upon Europeans. Okay, so we're not totally independent. And in many ways, unfortunately, we're more dependent today than we were in the 1920s, 1930s, with 1920s, especially after slavery, you have the Reconstruction Era from 1865 to 1877. And you're going to have us acquiring land, acquiring farms, etc. You're going to, 1905, you have the creation of the foundation of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma is laid, the Greenwood District. 1905, you have oil discovered in Oklahoma around 1905 also. And this is going to create African-American millionaires, et cetera. But what's going to happen is you're going to have the Great Depression, where we're going to lose a lot of ground during the Great Depression. We're going to lose land. In 1930, we know the Great Depression starts in 1929, but 1930, we owned 900,000 farms. By 1939, it dropped down to 682,000. We lost millions of acres of land, hundreds of thousands of farms. And a lot of the programs instituted by the New Deal, a lot of these programs are going to shift resources into the hands of Europeans, whether it's the Minimum Wage Act, which 1935, which is going to set a minimum wage. But a lot of the jobs that we had, domestics and sharecroppers and things like this, a lot of jobs we had weren't regulated by the Minimum Wage Act. Social Security Act, 1935. A lot of African Americans cannot get Social Security because of the occupations that we held. Okay. And then you're going to have the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts in 1952 and 56, which are going to drive 41,000 miles of U.S. interstate highway throughout communities all across the country. They run through 1,600 African-American communities across the country, wiping out thousands of our businesses, wiping out homes, et cetera. So this is going to destabilize a lot of our economy and wipe out a lot of our businesses. So during the time of the Civil Rights Movement, a lot of people think that we just chose to stop shopping at our own businesses, and that's not true. No, we had less businesses to shop at because the expressways were wiping these businesses out. And we saw this happen here in Detroit. I-375 and I-75 went through Paradise Valley and Black Bottom, wiped out about 350 businesses here. Okay, so you're going to see this take place all across the country. Yes, you're going to have some African Americans who are going to start spending more money with white-owned businesses when desegregation happens. The real fight was not for integration, it was for desegregation. That's what the real fight was for. And people really should watch Eyes on the Prize. I don't have a whole lot of time to get into it here, but you should really watch Eyes on the Prize. They have some excerpts of it on YouTube also. You can go on Amazon and order the series, because I ordered the series from Amazon. But the real fight was for desegregation. We were saying, look, we fought in all the wars. We want first-class citizenship right now. We want the full right to vote enforced right now. We want to be able to go to state colleges like the University of Mississippi that James Meredith integrated in 1962 with the help of Medgar Evers, who was assassinated June 12, 1963. So you may have saw my presentation that I did on Medgar Evers, and we broadcast it here on Facebook Live, talking about Medgar Evers. I did my show last night, the African History Network show on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. We broadcast it here. So we were saying we want first-class citizenship. We want all of our rights right now. Okay. The goal was not to abandon our businesses and go shop with white people. That was not the goal. You had state institutions like the University of Mississippi that our taxpayer dollars were paying for, but we could not attend. But white people could go to those state institutions that our taxpayer dollars were paying for. Okay. And get careers, get jobs, go buy houses, all different types of things like this. So there's a whole chronology of history that we have to understand. Okay. All right. So how's everybody doing? Hey, I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. Today is June 19th, 2017. So we're dealing with the history of Juneteenth. A lot of people don't know our history. Hey, Haki Ami. Okay. So June 25th, I'll be in Maryland. It was at Capitol Hills, Maryland. I'll be in the Maryland area with Haki Ami. He posted here on Facebook. I'll be with Rick Mathis, as well, director of the film Black Friday, and also Dave Anderson, as well, who's a producer on the film. And we're doing a screening in, let's see, Capitol Heights, Maryland, at Everlasting Life Restaurant, 9185 Central Avenue, 9185 Central Avenue, Everlasting Life Restaurant, Capitol Heights, Maryland. We do a screening and discussion of the documentary Black Friday, What Legacy Will You Leave? I'm in that documentary. We're showing Black Friday, the remix, actually. So you have Dr. Boyce Watkins in there. You have hip hop artist Chuck D. You have Tony Browder, Dr. Claude Anderson, Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene. They're all in that documentary. Dr. Umar Johnson, they're all in that documentary. Okay. So we'll get that flyer on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So you'll be able to check it out there. But we're talking about the history of Juneteenth. And I'm going to do a brief overview of my online class that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Because we have I'm teaching a session of it tonight, about 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can register for this online course. It's actually a 12-hour, it's really about 7-week online course. This one here is 7 weeks. And we deal with thousands of years of history, thousands of years of African history, African-American history. And we deal with a chronology of our history also. We don't start with us in slavery, getting our asses whooped. That's not where we start our history. And we also deal with the fact that African people have been in this land we call the United States of America at least 51,700 years. We deal with numerous books, articles, etc. We deal with some of the work coming from Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. Also, I'm trying to find the document here. So just give me a minute. I got a lot of articles here. I think we have about 3,000 articles printed. About 10,000 articles in my research database. It was a document I was trying to find and had it yesterday. I don't know where the hell I put it. Okay, so when I teach the class, and we have Minnie Jones, Tabitha watching. How y'all doing, Angela? When I teach the class, we do PowerPoint presentation. We have video clips incorporated. So you're actually going to see some of what we do here. Okay. And we posted the link there. You can register for the online course. The full course is only $40. All the sessions are recorded. If you miss anything, you can go back and watch it over and over again. Okay. All right. So let me turn this on, put this in presentation mode. So everybody share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Did you all learn anything from this? Hopefully you learned something. It's a lot of work to put this stuff together. Even though I know the information, just pulling together the notes to document what I'm talking about. For more information on Juneteenth, you can check out blackpast.org, blackpast.org. They have a couple articles dealing with Juneteenth. Also check out history.com, history.com. History.com is the official website of the History Channel, So you could check out information there on Juneteenth, and they have information there at history.com on the Civil War also. Okay. All right. So let me bring up this presentation. How's everybody doing on YouTube as well? We have, let's see, Frank on YouTube. How you doing, Frank? Dahuti, Asar, Hotep, brother, Shemotep. How you doing? Sheldon, we still want all rights. The legal system turns a blind eye on all cop shootings, black people, most of the cop shootings. One thing that people have to understand, and some people may not want to admit, one of the reasons why you have more police officers being prosecuted is because of Black Lives Matter. One of the reasons why because you have more police officers being prosecuted today than you did 10 years ago. One of the reasons why is because of Black Lives Matter and the protests that have taken place. You have other civil rights organizations, but Black Lives Matter has been at the front of that. Some people may not want to admit that, but that is one of the main reasons why. The broadcast I did last night, we have to get that up on YouTube. Well, actually, it's on Facebook Live. Watch the broadcast I did yesterday because we talked about Falando Castile shooting. Watch the broadcast I did last Friday, June 16th. I did a 2-hour, 5-minute broadcast dealing with the Falando Castile shooting, dealing with the facts of the case, and dealing with economic boycotts, economic withdrawal strategies, because we have to implement that. Economic boycotts, economic withdrawal strategies, okay? Dr. King, in his last speech, April 3rd, 1968, he said that we have to always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal. We have to always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal. Okay. So some of the things we deal with in the class, right? We deal with what was the transatlantic slave trade. We deal with what were some of the events leading up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. I talk about Malcolm X. You know, Malcolm's one of my heroes. Malcolm said he talked about the media and the power of the media. And he said that the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the ability to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. And that's power because they control the minds of the masses. The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the ability to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. And that's power because they control the minds of the masses. All right, so we deal with a chronology of history. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. Okay, we deal with work coming from Dr. David Imhotep as well, dealing with the ancient presence here in this country of African people. The Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. And this is the cover of his book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. Okay. And I've interviewed them about 10 times. If you go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, you can listen to the podcast of my shows also. Okay. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I just interviewed them about a month ago. It was in April, early May. I interviewed him. And you can listen to the interviews I've done with Dr. David Imhotep. All right. We'll post a link again here so you can register for the online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We're going to do I'm doing a quick overview of some of the content we deal with in the course. And we'll post this link here on YouTube also. You can also go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com as well. Okay. All right. So let's continue here. Okay. So on page 14 of his book, he deals with evidence of an African presence in this country that dates back at least 51,700 years. And this was found in Allendale County, South Carolina, by Dr. Albert Goodyear in 2004. Okay. And what they found were artifacts, architecture, campsites, footprints in lava, genetic M174 D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics. They found linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. Okay. 13 different disciplines, thoroughly documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years. So we were here before Native Americans even came into existence. The people who we call Native Americans are the offspring of an intermixing of Africans who were already here. And you're going to have other groups besides the Khoisan. You have a presence of Africans from ancient Kemet here. And they are voyaging back and forth from this land to Africa also. But you're going to have Asians who come here around 3000 BC. And the Asians and Africans are going to intermix. And their offspring are going to be who we call Native Americans. Their offspring are going to be who we call Native Americans. Now, the transatlantic slave trade happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm saying it didn't happen the way Europeans have taught us that it happened, number one. Number two, you're going to have groups of Black Indians. Because the other thing is that a lot of the indigenous African people that were here already before Europeans got here, before even Native Americans were here, a lot of them get reclassified by Europeans as Black Indians. And when you read Dr. David Imhotep's book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, he talks about how Captain John Smith said he was captured by a group of Black Indians in 1607, Jamestown, Virginia. He was captured by a group of Black Indians. Okay. So this is a lot of history that's not talked about, not dealt with. All right. So you have this history here. This article is from 2004, November 18th, 2004, from ScienceDaily.com, This article deals with Dr. Alba Goodyear's archaeological discovery in 2004. This article came out 13 years ago. The name of this article is New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 Years Ago. New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 years ago. And here is what it says. It says radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May. So this is talking about May of 2003. Were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County, South Carolina, by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Alba Goodyear, indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age, Now, these were African people. These were only people on the face of the earth then. Native Americans don't even exist at this time, okay? One of the things we deal with in the class are archaeological discoveries. And you've had some recent archaeological discoveries that are turning the archaeological world upside down, like the discovery in Morocco revealed earlier this month of 300,000 of skeletons that date back between 300,000 to 350,000 years old of modern man, Homo sapiens. These were African people. Okay. Totally flipping the archaeological world upside down. This article right here is from the New York Times, February 15th, 2010. These are some of the things we deal with in the course. We don't just deal with slavery. We deal with a chronology of history leading up to the transatlantic slave trade so we can better understand it and put it in historical perspective. This article here, this discovery was a discovery that turned the archaeological world upside down also. This article talks about stone tools discovered on the Greek island of Crete, okay, over the course of 2 summers. And these stone tools date back 130,000 years ago, at least. And Crete has been an island for more than 5 million years, which meant these African people sailed there. Okay. And in the article from the New York Times, this is from the New York Times, February 15, 2010, it says stone tools found on the Greek island of Crete over 2 summers, archaeologists say are at least 130,000 years old, which is considered strong evidence for the earliest known seafaring in the Mediterranean and calls for rethinking the maritime capabilities of pre-human cultures. This is causing this discovery here in 2010 is causing them to totally have to rethink everything. It says Crete has been an island for more than 5 million years, meaning that the tool makers must have arrived by boat. So this seems to push the history of Mediterranean voyaging back more than 100,000 years, specialists in Stone Age archaeology say. Okay, they thought that sailing in the Mediterranean dated back 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. This discovery is causing them to have to rethink everything and push those dates back over 100,000 years. The deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets, the more research they do, the older we get. The discovery from the discovery revealed earlier this month from Morocco. All the news outlets carried this story. New York Times, Washington Post, NBC News, Seeker.com, which is the official website of the Discovery Channel, LA Times, all of them carried this story. Okay, I'm going to show you this article from NBCnews.com. Okay, because I keep up on these archaeological discoveries, and we deal with this type of information in this online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, how's everybody doing on Facebook and YouTube, our YouTube channel? Okay, and if you visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, it connects you to our social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter. Connects you to all of that, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so let me, I want to change the screen share here and show you this article. Okay, and let's bring this up. I'm toggling back and forth between different technologies here, so you got to bear with me. Okay. So this article here, and we'll go to some of your comments on Facebook and YouTube in just a minute. This came out June 7th, 2017. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. Now, in this article just came out this month. Okay. It says modern humans evolved much earlier than previously thought, researchers reported Wednesday. This article came out June 7th. Now, did you all hear about this? Now, those that follow us on the African History Network may have found out about this because I did a broadcast about it and we posted articles about it. But those that are just seeing us for the first time today, did you hear about this? Modern humans evolved much earlier than previously thought, researchers reported on Wednesday. New discoveries at a rich site in Morocco. Now, Morocco is and still is in Africa. That's in Africa. Okay. Show modern humans were hunting and probably cooking game animals 300,000 years ago. And this is 100,000 years earlier than scientists have believed until now. This totally flipped the archaeological world upside down. The site near Morocco's coast and the city of Makarek has always yielded interesting human remains, but they had been dated to around 40,000 years ago, the previous ones. New discoveries and new dating methods show that, in fact, many of the bones belong to modern Homo sapiens, modern man, and they lived as far back as 300,000 or 350,000 years ago. Okay, now the earliest previous bones or remains of Homo sapiens they had dated back 195,000 years ago. These date back 100,000 to 150,000 years before that in Morocco. The ones that dated back 195,000 years ago are in modern day Ethiopia. They go on to say, taken together, the findings show modern humans were dispersed across Africa long before anyone ever thought. This is just totally flipping the archaeological world upside down. And the deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets. The more research they do, the older we get. The deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets. The more research they do, the older we get. So they keep having to push dates back. Okay. All right. And then the discovery from the discovery of the mastodon skeletons from in this article up here that came out in April. This discovery flipped the archaeological world upside down also. Okay. Make sure you can see this here. All right. This one here, all the news outlets carried this story. I saw numerous articles, Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, CNN, Discovery Channel's website. All of them had this story. Mastodon bone findings up in our understanding of human history. Now, mastodon is a prehistoric animal. It's like the precursor to elephants. Okay. Paleontologists, who are scientists who study dinosaurs, paleontologists have dug up a 130,000-year-old mastodon skeleton that looks like it was smashed apart by humans. But they found it in America, where people were not supposed to have arrived for another 100,000 years. They found this in San Diego. This is from NBCnews.com. This is not InfoWars or The Onion.com. This is NBCnews.com. All the news outlets had this, and this was published in the Journal of Nature, just like the other archaeological discovery I just showed you was published in the Journal of Nature. So you can go read this information for yourself, okay? One of the things I tell people is proper documentation ends all conversation. I tell people, you don't have to believe a word that I say. Go do your own research. Proper documentation ends all conversation. You don't have to believe a word that I say, okay? You can research this yourself. All right, now, so they found this mastodon skeleton in San Diego, California, okay, in North America, in America, where humans were not supposed to have arrived for another 100,000 years. They asked the question, how could this have happened? The researchers say they think early humans must have come to America much earlier than anyone ever thought. They suggest that other scientists start looking for evidence of people in places they never bothered looking before. Let me repeat this. They suggest that other scientists start looking for evidence of people in places they never bothered looking before. Okay, we'll post a link of this article on our YouTube channel for those watching on YouTube, and also on our Facebook fan page. Okay, now in this article, they interview Dr. Albert Goodyear. Okay, they interviewed Dr. Albert Goodyear, who, and let me bring this up here. Okay, they interviewed Dr. Albert Goodyear, who made the discovery back in 2004 in Allendale County, South Carolina, of a presence of modern man that dated back 51,700 years ago. And he talked about how the established archaeologists were challenging his find because they contend that the earliest modern man civil culture or discovery goes back to the Clovis culture in New Mexico that dates back about 13,000 years ago. But African people, we were here tens of thousands of years before that. And there's a concerted effort to suppress this type of information that shows a human presence in the land we call the United States of America prior to the Clovis culture. Because then you have to ask the question, who are these people? Because they weren't Europeans. And when they do the research, you're going to find these were African people. So then they're going to have to ask the question, well, what does that mean? That means African people were here before Native Americans, which is what Dr. David Imhotep is saying and other scholars are saying. So then you have to ask the question, well, whose land was this? Because this land belonged to African people. And then you're going to have the offspring of the intermixing of Africans and Asians, who we call Native Americans. But these people were here before Europeans got here. So this was our land stolen from us. Now, yes, the transatlantic slave trade happens. And yes, a lot of us have ancestry dating back to enslaved African people. But some of us have ancestry going back to groups of free African people who get renamed Native Americans, or maybe called Black Indians also. So this is the type of history we deal with in the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach in school. Share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. How's everybody doing? If you need me to post a link again on Facebook or YouTube so you can register for the course, we're teaching the session tonight. It's going to start a little bit after 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have to shift and get ready for that. It's about 2 hours. It's a 12-hour, is originally a 6-week course. It's going to be 7 weeks. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are recorded. It's normally on Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I was pissed off about the Falando Castile verdict. So I did a 2-hour, 5-minute broadcast last Friday, breaking down that case, because I had been following that case. Like a lot of other police cases. And I talked about economic boycotts, things like that. You can watch that video here on our Facebook fan page, and it's on our YouTube channel also. So we moved the Friday class to Monday, and it's good because today's Juneteenth. And then when you register for the course, you'll be able to watch the class we did, the last class we did the previous week. And it is also going to register you for a new section of the class we have starting up this Friday, June 23rd. So you'll be able to also join this Friday for session number 1. And all the sessions are recorded. So if you miss anything, you can go back and watch it over and over again. Okay. So the class is called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay. So we deal with thousands of years of African history, African American history. We talk some about, Freemasonry. We talk about Asar, Aset, and Heru, the first Holy Trinity, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus, because that ancient Kemet deals with Freemasonry, and the Moors also tied to this, because the Moors, the Africans known as the Moors, who go into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, in 711 AD, and they civilize Europe. They're taking the teachings coming from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. George G.M. James and Stolen Legacy said that they were the custodians of the ancient Egyptian mystery system, but they're teaching a lot of this information to Europeans. And you're going to have this incorporated into Freemasonry, which is going to evolve later. And the founding fathers, or fondling fathers, as Dr. Francis Cress Wilson called them, 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. And Freemasonry deals with watered down principles coming from ancient Egypt and symbolism. So you see a symbol like this, the Washington Monument, but it's actually a Tekken. A Tekken is a symbol of resurrection. It's a spiritual symbol, a symbol of resurrection and transformation. And you had about 1,200 Tekkenu throughout ancient Kemet. Okay, today there are only about 12 of them. And some of them have been taken to Istanbul, Turkey, and Vatican City, and taken Paris, France, things like this, taken throughout the world. Okay, but this is coming from ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet. All right. Now, Freemasonry, when we look at Freemasonry, it's important to understand where these concepts come from. The word Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun. And Mason means child of light. And the term Mason, or child of light, expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. So for centuries, knowledge was associated with the light. Okay. And darkness is associated with ignorance. Okay. So when you have the Moors going into Europe, Europe was actually the dark continent, because they were ignorant. They were in the dark ages. And the Moors are taking the light into the darkness to bring Europe out of darkness. When you have a child in school who's very smart, they'll say that's a bright child, bright relating to light, brightness. If the child is ignorant, they say that's a dim-witted child, or that child is dim, D-I-M, lack of light, darkness. When you watch cartoons and the cartoon character gets an idea, you may see a light bulb over their head, and the light bulb comes on to symbolize light, knowledge. Now, the term child of light, or sons and daughters of light, because we taught African women as well, was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of ancient Kemet, places where the light or knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees. And if you read Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder, pages 18 and 32, he talks about this. And when you go to college, we have to understand that the concept of the liberal arts college is based upon the teachings coming out of the ancient Kemetic mystery system, the liberal arts, the trivium and the quadrivium, the 7 liberal arts, the trivium and the quadrivium. And you get your credentials in a series of degrees: bachelor's degree, master's degree, philosophy degree, PhD degree. This is where this stuff comes from. Okay, so this is the type of information we deal with. Okay, so we deal with some of the history of religion, things like this, because we deal with the chronology of history. We deal with the origins of Christmas, etc. You know, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing and Nellie Fuller, they taught us, if you do not understand European white supremacy and racism, what it is and how it works, everything else, and I do mean everything else that you think that you understand, will totally confuse you. And many of our people don't understand racism. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, coming out of the ideology of white supremacy. Racism has nothing to do with not liking people or hating people. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, coming out of the ideology of white supremacy. This is what racism is. So we deal with the role that Christopher Columbus played also. Okay. Is one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Dr. Jeffries teaches us that whoever controls the images controls your self-esteem, self-respect, and self-development. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. Whoever controls the images controls your self-esteem, self-respect, and self-development. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. Okay. So we deal with Christopher Columbus in the role that Columbus plays. This is Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, another one of my teachers also. We deal with the origins of the term America, the origins of the term Africa. We deal with the problem with slave movies as well, and proliferation of slave movies designed to keep us in a slave mentality for the most part, to lock our history into what I call the 1619 myth, the myth that the history of African people started in this country August 20th, 1619. August 20th, 1619 happened, but we were here for tens of thousands of years continuously before that. Okay. All right. So then you have the cancellation TV show Underground. I talked about that as well. Stephen Biko, one of our great South African freedom fighters, he told us that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So we deal with the Africans known as the Moors and who were the Moors. We deal with Christopher Columbus and his 4 voyages. Very important, because the Moors are going to set Columbus up to set sail on his 4 voyages. Nautical instruments that Columbus is using are based upon Moors technology and the nautical instruments they introduce. And the Moors are going to introduce spherical globes and almanacs, all different types of things like this, right? The first universities built in Europe. Well, first of all, the first university built in Europe, the University of Salamanca in Spain, 1285 AD, was built by African Moors and Arabs. A lot of your early universities, like University of Barcelona, University of Toledo, Oxford University, things like this, they were built to study the teachings that the Moors took into Europe. Okay. But when we look at Columbus and where he went on his 4 voyages, it's important for us to understand that he never comes to the land we call the United States of America. So we have to stop lying to our children, teaching them that Columbus discovered America. Okay. He never comes to the land that we call the United States of America. If we look at where he went, and I'll show this to you in just a second. How's everybody doing on Facebook and YouTube? All right. Are you learning anything? How do you like this information? He set sail August 3rd, 1492 on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And he goes into San Salvador, what we call the Bahamas. He goes into Cuba, Hispaniola, what we call Haiti. That's the first voyage. Second voyage, September 1493, he goes into the West Indies and Puerto Rico or Bariquan. He also goes into Jamaica in 1494. May 1498, he goes into Trinidad and Venezuelan mainland in South America. Fourth voyage, May 1504, he goes into Panama and Honduras in Central America. Now he dies in 1506. Okay, thank God, because he was a demon. Columbus decimated the population. He exterminated between 12 million and 25 million people. And that's an estimation from a Bishop Bartholomew de las Casas, who went with Columbus on some of his voyages. So the closest Columbus comes to this land we call the United States of America was Cuba, which is 90 miles away. He never came to this land. So we need to stop telling that lie, saying that he came here and telling our children that Columbus discovered America. No. And at least 70% of the people that Columbus came in contact with on his 4 voyages were African people. If you read the first Americans were Africans, documented evidence, but Dr. David Imhotep, he deals with this in his book. Now, you don't have to buy any of these books to be able to understand the class, follow along in the class. You can get them if you want to for your own personal library. Every African-American home has to have an education center. We have entertainment centers with the flat screen TVs, the Wiis, the PlayStations, the Xboxes, the Blu-ray DVD players, but we have to have education centers with the books, the DVDs, the documentaries, the almanacs, the globes, the dictionaries, etc. Okay. So the first Americans were Africans, documented evidence, but he talks about this in his book, how at least 70% of the people Columbus encounters in his 4 voyages are still African people. But Bishop Bartholomew de las Casas estimates that Columbus was responsible for the murder of 12 to 25 million indigenous people. Okay. All right. Now, if you need me to post a link again, so you can register for this online course, because we're going to teach it we're going to start a little bit after 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. Let me know. I'll post that link again. And this will also register you for our new section starting up on Fridays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. All the sessions are recorded. If you miss any of it, you can go back and watch it over and over again. This class is only $40. Regularly $60, on sale $40. Okay, now, so we deal with when did Africans first come to the U.S. as slaves. We deal with did Africans sell themselves into slavery also. We deal with a lot of this history. We deal with what was the transatlantic slave trade, what was the Middle Passage. We deal with the role that life insurance companies played also, because a lot of people don't know that not only did you have insurance companies that took out insurance policies on the slave ships, but also on the enslaved African cargo on the ships. But you also had over 40 insurance companies that took out insurance policies on slaves on the plantations. Okay, because some of the enslaved Africans who did very dangerous work, like working in sawmills, working on steam engines, working in coal mines, some of the slave owners would take out insurance policies on them so they could recoup 3/4 of their investment in that slave when they died. Okay, when they were killed. So this is a whole another aspect of history that a lot of people don't know about. So we also deal with the fake Willie Lynch speech of 1712, because Willie Lynch never historically existed. Okay, Willie Lynch never historically existed. There's language in that speech that there's language in that speech that didn't even exist in the early 1800s. Okay, Willie Lynch never historically existed. All right, this speech has been proven to be a fraud. And if you check out the work from Dr. Manu Ampim, Manuampim, Manu Ampim, he has a series of essays he's written called Death to the Willie Lynch Speech. You can go to his website, manuampim.com. And I've interviewed him a few times before about this. We have those episodes archived, manuampim.com. But when you read slave narratives, when you study history, you don't read about a Willie Lynch in the 18th century anywhere who delivered a speech on the banks of the James River in 1712. There's something made up. Okay. All right. So this is some of the type of information that we deal with in the course. Tonight we'll talk about some of the laws that existed during slavery. We'll talk about the father of modern gynecology, J. Marion Sims, and how we're going to deal with how art and media changed the way people think of this butcher who was doing operations on enslaved African people, especially African women, J. Marion Sims. We'll deal with some other topics tonight also in the class as well. Okay. And you can also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have a lot of information there. All of my DVD lectures are there also. I have about 30 of my DVD lectures there, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have a recommended reading list of books there as well. And you can read all of the articles that I write also. I write articles as well. You can read all the articles that I write also. Another book we use in the course, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. Also, Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. And there's some other books that we use also. A ton of articles that we cite as well. Okay, so let's see here. We have... on Facebook here, Sasha and Michael Muhammad, Jennifer, Tabitha. Who do we have here on YouTube? Okay, David on YouTube, D Red. Started in Europe, please. Thank you. Sister Mawu Netter, can you please talk about the human started in Europe? What do you mean the human started in Europe? Are you talking about the Africans who get trapped in the warm ice age? And because of climatological biology, they start to depigment and become Europeans? Or what are you talking about? You have to explain to me what you're talking about, Sister Mawu. Okay. All right. Now, hey, you can listen to my show every Thursday also. Well, I'm on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, Detroit, WFDF. We do radio here in Detroit. We podcast a lot of those shows. We broadcast on Facebook Live. I'm on Thursday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wake Up with Steve Hood, the morning show here in Detroit. And then I do my show, the African History Network show, on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The African History Network show, Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the Willie Lynch speech was written in about 1970 by Dr. Kwabena Ashanti. He's come out and admitted that he wrote it. Professor Manu Ampem basically exposed them and forced them out. He wrote it to try to show African Americans how they were acting like slaves, but in my opinion, it's done more harm than good because people think it's actual history and think that's what actually happened to us, and that's not true at all. We need to study real history, like read The Destruction of Black Civilization by Dr. Chancellor Williams, and study real history to understand what actually happened to us, as opposed to fake history like the Willie Lynch letter. Okay. So we'll post a link again here. You can register for this online course, and I'm about to teach. How'd you all like this information? Did you all learn anything? We'll post it here. And it's a 12-hour, 6-week online course. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. As soon as you register, you can watch the class from last week, and it's going to register you for the new section that we have starting up this Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And all the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch them over and over again also, okay? All right, so now for some reason I'm freezing up here on YouTube, it looks like. So we're going to try to refresh that screen. Okay. Tatum Marie said, is it true that white people came from us? That is a leading theory about a depigmentation of African people, but you're going to have Europeans who you have genetic mutations. You're going to have genetic mutations, and you're going to have, and Professor Kaba Kamene talks about this, formerly known as Booker T. Coleman. You see him in the Hidden Colors documentaries. He talks about how you have genetic mutations that breed with genetic mutations and create what we call Europeans that come from originally African people. You have some people who go with other theories, but that's the dominant theory that most evidence points to. Okay, so visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have 750 podcasted episodes there. You can read all of my articles. I've written, I think, about 50 articles. We have a recommended reading list of books there also. A lot of information. Who wants to register for this online course? How long do I usually do these? Well, the class is usually 2 hours. These online presentations, we usually do every other day or something like that. The radio shows are usually 2 hours. We'll broadcast on Facebook Live for the radio shows. Be sure to subscribe to our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Subscribe for the notifications for the Facebook Live broadcast. Dr. Boyce Watkins broadcast on our Facebook fan page also. We're broadcasting on our fan page, The African History Network. I'm the founder of the African History Network, Michael Imhotep. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. I teach the online classes at our online school, the African History Network School also. Okay, so Crystal, Jeff. Okay, so be sure we posted the link. If you need me to post a link again, we'll post it again so you can register for the online course because we're about to start it up here in a few minutes. I have to get ready for that. Somebody mentioned the Caucasian race. Now, the term Caucasian is coined by Dr. Johann Friedrich Blumenbach in 1779. That's where that term comes from. He named white people Caucasian after the Georgians, okay, in Europe, the Georgians who lived near the Caucasus Mountains. That's where that term comes from, Caucasian. That's where that term comes from. And that was coined in 1779. He's going to be one of the people who stratify humanity into races. And we deal with this, more in depth in the class. But you have Dr. Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, because we deal with the evolution of the concept of race over a 300-year period, 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. You also have Dr. Carl von Linnaeus, who is known as the father of modern taxonomy. And he stratifies living things into groups, the genus and the families and the different groups that we study in biology. That comes from Dr. Carl von Linnaeus. And he's going to stratify humanity into races. And then he's going to attach moral and ethical and intellectual capabilities and standards to these races, but he's not using any scientific data or any scientific foundation to come up with these conclusions. He's going to incorporate a lot of stereotypes into associating moral and ethical and intellectual capabilities to these various races. And then this in turn gets incorporated into European society and gets handed down generation to generation. All right, so look, guys, we got to get out of here. Visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have documentaries there. We have the Hidden Colors documentaries, Out of Darkness. All of my lectures are there also. We have bundle packs. You can also donate to the African History Network if you like this information, like this type of information. Because when we broadcast, it means a few things. Number one, the technology. Number one, the online school, the platform we have for the online school costs about $700 a month to maintain that platform. Number two, it meant that somebody paid the internet bill for us to broadcast from. That was me. Number three, it meant that somebody paid the electric bill so we could broadcast. That was me also. Okay, so if you like this type of information and you want to support the African History Network, you can make a donation at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com and click on the yellow donate button right on the homepage. or you can buy DVDs also. That helps support us also. Okay. All right. So, hey, remember at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. We'll talk to you next time. Peace. And we'll see you in class in a few minutes. Peace.